Welcome to CRIPTIC, the Cultural Research Practice of Teaching Collaborative. My name is Federica Goffi, and I am the chair of CRIPTIC and a professor here at the School of Architecture at Alton University. And today we are conducting an interview with Dr. Henrik Oxvig to discuss a PhD program that educates doctoral students from fields of conservation, design, and architecture at the Royal Danish Academy, which includes also industrial PhD students. And the interview is conducted by a group of PhD and MAS students, Julie Ivanoff, Kitt, Christopher Alton, and Aymen Aiblu. So welcome, Professor Oxvig. And
thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us.
And thank you for inviting me. So I hopefully can give you some satisfying answers. But we have had a dialogue about where we are. We are a bit different from what you thought, I think so. But let's find out. It's a bit complicated, isn't it? But
yes.
I'm trying to make it easy.
Yes. And this is how we learn, really, and we really appreciate you giving us your perspective on your program. So we would like to start by asking you about your role in the program, if you could describe that, and also how you have contributed to shaping and developing the program over the time in which you've been following it.
Yes. It's a special situation in Denmark. While we are not a university, it's an academy, and we are, in the academy tradition, and we still are, but it's an academy that originally didn't conduct research or scientific research. But then it was decided that we should do that in accordance with demands for higher education throughout Europe and so forth. It was demanded that we sort of also base our teaching and our programs on research. Originally, it was only an artistic institution. Now it's an institution conducting both research and artistic research, and we divide between these two. And I'm head of the program, the scientific part of it. You can follow me?
Yes.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I'm not trained at the institution. I'm trained at a university. I'm trained in literature, social science, and later on I held positions at Copenhagen University in art history. Then 20 years ago, I got a position at the Royal Danish Academy, and it quickly became my job sort of to develop the PhD program. We didn't have one, but I came from the university. That was part of my background. And it was, a demand or a wish also to have a PhD program at the School of Architecture. That was the one I was sort of, I held a position at the School of Architecture. And I worked with this, developing a PhD program at an art school, but securing that we conducted scientific research at the PhD program. Because our candidates, they are sort of to be at level with people from the universities, as a matter of fact, our PhD candidates. So that's part of the sort of challenge. And what happened was then, after having done this, I got some funding from research councils to develop this program. It was I got funding from 2006 until 2011. And it was then sort of accepted, the program, as at level with what they had at the university. And it was at the same time then, around 2011, decided that my school, the School of Architecture, should merge with two other schools, the School of Conservation and the School of Design. So where I am now is a merger of three schools. I started developing the program at the School of Architecture, and students from the School of Design were sort of enrolled in my PhD program there, but that school didn't, at that time, the School of Design it wasn't acknowledged as a research institution in its own right. And they sort of became that via the PhD effort. And then we merged it, and also with the School of Conservation, which is, well, a scientific school, but even though they're working with artistic conservation and so forth, but they are sort of natural scientists, and we merge with them. So we are an art school with natural scientists also. And if you can follow me, it was a merger of these three schools that made a PhD program, or I'm the head of that PhD program with these three schools. It was then, at that time, around that in Denmark, decided that we could have what we call PhD schools. Earlier on, it was a PhD program. Now it became PhD school with certain requirements for that, what a PhD school is, and I can tell you about that later on. Because this effort was part of the sort of an effort, national effort, sort of to higher the knowledge level in society, one could say. And it was financed a lot, research finance. There was a lot of funding in it from governmental parts in raising sort of the level, and we were part of that. Well, the industrial PhD, which developed at the same time, sort of, is also part of this, sort of securing that research influences industry also. So it's one could say it's an effort of heightening the level, the knowledge level at an academy, securing at the same time that we still have an artistic part, but then we have this dual obligation, one could say, that we should secure being at a level scientifically, and at the same time that we teach or architects and so forth in accordance with the academic tradition, which we are pretty proud of in Denmark. We have had, many good architects coming out from my school here, for instance. But we merged these three schools, and we were moved from then the Ministry of Culture to the Ministry of Science. So we are a special school in the Ministry of Science. We are now together with the universities. They are in the Ministry of Science. But we are a special school conducting both artistic research and scientific research. We are the only institution in the Ministry of Science doing both. And I'm head then of the PhD program, which is, until now, which is only scientific. We would like to have a third cycle degree in the art field also. We do not have that yet, but we go for that. And something is happening around Europe also regarding that. So, and my job was then, after the merger of the three schools, sort of to develop a PhD school that could sort of accommodate, well, teaching of PhD students from a very broad field, one could say. They are from the field of conservation and from the field of design and from the field of architecture, those PhD students that I'm responsible for. So it's not only architecture, it's, you see, a broad field. And then on top of it, it's also PhD students related to industry.
Okay.
And then, well, yeah, I can say more, but maybe you should have
ahead.
the time. Sort
go
of
ahead. Yeah, we were interested to know indeed, how, this notion of the PhD school, as you mentioned it, and also, like, are there core courses that all the students share across the different disciplines, or are they fairly separated? I was wondering if you also teach in the program, something that brings the students together, and how long you've had the program, and also how does the industrial the industrial program fits into it, in the sense, can students be in any of the three areas and be part of, let's say, follow an industrial PhD program?
Yeah. And for the we can return. I'm not sure I answer all your questions because there were quite a few. But let me try. I have to say that then the PhD study in Denmark is highly regulated, meaning that we have to secure that a PhD student finishes within 3 years, no more, 3 years, and it's on behalf also that it is well, you have a high salary as a PhD student in Denmark. It is as having a job, and the salary is comparable to having a job in an architectural office. So you can live by that being a PhD student. But at the same time, and there is this effort from the Danish government sort of to put a lot of money into research, but we have at the same time to secure that the PhD student finishes within 3 years. And we have certain tools to securing that, and I can tell you about those tools. That's part of the PhD school that is capable sort of to securing this. And the PhD school has sort of to evaluate its efforts every 5 years. That's part of it also. Are we doing it? Are we fulfilling our obligations, sort of securing that PhD students meet the level and finishes within 3 years. The average study time in my school now is around 3 years and 2 months. So, and that has changed. Earlier, you could stay a PhD student for 8 years or something like that, and you could stay enrolled in my program for 8 years. Now there is a law saying that if you want your salary or your scholarship finishes, and you have to have something to live by, you need social funding. Then we have to disenroll the student after these 3 years, in order sort of to press us to secure that the student finishes within time, and we pay, of course, certain efforts in order to secure that. And this is different from what you experience today, even in Sweden, which is close by here, or in Norway, or in Finland. The Danish PhD education is highly regulated. It's not that regulated, I think, yet in the other Scandinavian countries, but they sort of envy us also, because once in a while they have PhD students that never finishes, one could say. I'm not necessarily arguing that it's a good idea having this short span of time to finish your PhD project, but on the other hand, well, you can make a good project within 3 years. And we have sort of, I'm trying sort of to answer your question also, but I'm giving you a bit of context, because within these 3 years, you do not just have to write a PhD dissertation. You also have to train teaching in your research. You have to use half a year in teaching, or what amounts to 30 ECTS points. Teaching, you teach, and you teach in your research project. So you have to plan with that. When you make a plan for your PhD project, 3 years, half year for teaching, another half year for receiving teaching. So that's 1 year. And then you have 2 years left sort of to writing your thesis, conducting research. But you on top of that also have sort of to have a stay abroad or at another research institution. And what is, reality is that we have to plan with this. So I start, when we have a new PhD student, the PhD student's career starts with a PhD student writing an application. And often it's very competitive. It's a there's a high competition. In order to gain a scholarship, it is people like to do that. So we could have one position and perhaps 70 applicants. It's like that.
How many in total? How many positions in total can you take every year?
We have enrolled now, I think, 45 PhD students, and they finish within 3 years. You see, so it's every year it's more than 10 new PhD students, and some are financed by the academy, and some are financed by collaboration, for instance, with industry. Or others are financed by, research applications by professors from the Danish Research Council. And then they are part of a bigger research project. There are different profiles. But what they share, all these PhD students, you see, it's a bit complex because they are from very many different fields. As a matter of fact, we have 45 PhD students, and some are even natural scientists, and others are, into humanities. But so it's a very broad spectrum of projects. And the school, the PhD school's task, obligation is then to secure that they make a plan when they start. What I said is that the PhD student has made an application in competition with others, and we choose the best. But then they start, and then they start thinking, okay, I also have to teach half a year, and also have to receive teaching. And what I say is then, I keep an intro meeting with them and their supervisors, telling them about, these obligations. And they are related to the qualification frame, the learning goals for PhD. I can return to that also, but these obligations. And then they have to make a plan within the first 2 months for their 3 years. And it might mean that they change something in the project because they now know that they have to finish with also these obligations within 3 years. And it is done with a supervisor and in dialogue with me also. And with the supervisor is one capable of supervising exactly this project, and I am more into the generic part of it. And also, if I have also supervised myself PhD students when they're close to my field, which is, as a matter of fact, architectural history. But my job is not architectural history, one could say. It's more, what does it mean sort of to teach research, to teach a researcher? What is research, one could say? And what makes it possible to train these very different researchers from many different fields is, for instance, or I would say primarily, the qualification frame. And I don't know if you have a qualification frame. Does it ring a bell when I say
yes.
Qualification frame? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And the qualification frame related to our PhD school is the very same qualification frame related to every faculty at the university. And that is what sort of secures that, this is research at a generic level. They have to understand, and I can tell you about the qualification frame, but that is what makes it possible to run the PhD school with these many, many different topics. So it's not, I won't say that it's not topic driven, but it's a dialogue between topics and the generic part. And that's sort of my job to make that work. And I think it works. but we had our PhD program school evaluated 2 years ago. And it was an international panel. Every 5 years, we have to write a self-evaluation report telling about what I'm telling you about. How do you run this? How have you arranged yourself? In my school, that was the first time we did it because it's a pretty new thing, having PhD schools. But at the universities, they have done it two times. We have only done it once. And then I wrote a self-evaluation report telling about the program and telling and motivating why we have organized ourselves as we have, and also telling about that we evaluate along the way and so forth, and also telling about what we see as challenges and problems, because it's not just running smooth, of course. And then an international panel was invited to conduct interviews at the school and they read the report, the self-evaluation report, and then they visited our school and interviewed PhD students and supervisors and so forth. And then they wrote an evaluation report telling what they thought of it. And that panel was a panel of one architect, one from design school, and one from field of conservation. And they had never before been together, one could say, these different fields. But they were together, of course, because that's our reality. And they, well, I think they think that they wrote that we do it pretty well. We have problems, of course, but we sort of passed, I would say. So it's possible.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful to hear. It's impressive that you can follow that many students and also fund them at that level. That's fantastic that you can do that. And
the funding?
Yeah, the funding, yes,
yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question that we had, and I was intrigued by, because we had never had in all these years the opportunity to actually speak with a school that also has an industrial PhD course of study. So I was wondering how that fits into this larger framework. And if you want to comment on, let's say, for example, how does that, what does that mean in terms of, the funding, but also in terms of how, the type of research that the students do, and whether, let's say, when they finish, are they more oriented to practice, or do they still go in academia? Where do the students go when they do that type of program?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I can say anything general about it, but we have 45 PhD students within 3 years, and you see they are not employed at the school afterwards. They are, and that's part of the reason for having this funding of research in the Danish society. They are out in society. So it's not meant that they should sort of become researchers full-time at an institution like mine, and we do not have positions for them, of course. 45 PhD students in 3 years is much more than we have positions almost, yeah. Well, it's not, yeah. So it's meant that they sort of participate in society, or that the companies, the industry, become sort of research influence in their practice. That's the long-term, I would say, goal, that we, as a society, understand sort of to make research influence practice at every level. There are, of course, also many other things influence in practice than research, but the aspiration is sort of to make research part of it, part of, well, every aspect of society, one could say. So research plays a larger role now in the Danish society than it did earlier. And our industrial PhD program with companies, it could also be with museums. We have also industrial PhDs in the field of conservation or in the field of design. It's a collaboration between an institution like mine, and it's the institution having the responsibility for the academic level, and a museum or a an office, an architectural office, and they then have sort of the, well, one could say the responsibility to inform or to make this bridging of research and practice success. And I think this is something which is hopefully we are becoming better and better at it, I would say, because it's not without challenges. There are, of course, challenges in this effort, and I could also tell you about those challenges. But the ideal is sort of that research becomes part of society. So. Demands broadly.
This is it's fascinating, you know, like we've done research in the past in PhD programs by practice, where, you know, the PhD students and candidates essentially remain in their own practice, and they have a way of analyzing their own work and how they work and theorizing that. And we did this interview with Leo van Schaik at MIT a long time ago. We've done a few on PhDs by design, where you know, the PhD students and candidates are questioning the discipline through a kind of design project within an academic setting, and for example, the Bartlett and others. But I sort of wonder, when it comes to, I guess, the notion of industrial course of study, do the students establish, let's say, in their application already that they want to take that kind of path, that they want to work with a specific industry, they pose the problem, and they also somehow, they already make that link, or do you facilitate that?
Well, it's already in the application phase that sort of this link is established. Sort of often an application for funding of this is created or developed together with people at the academy and people in industry. They join forces in making the application, and then we have a funding called innovation funding. I think it's a funding that is 12 years old or something like that, exactly for this. So they make an application and have it sort of evaluated by this body called Innovation Foundation, that sort of will give it is, as a matter of fact, also it's funded by the company, by the academy, and by the Innovation Foundation. So it's a three-part funding, one could say. And it needs, as you can see, like said like this, a collaboration in order to develop the project even. So colleagues at my institution are aware of this, and then they sort of are using their contacts in order sort of to develop projects like this. And we are, we have sort of to create the funding. And as said, it's not all our PhD students funded like this. This is the industrial PhDs. It's funded in this way. Yeah. Then we also have others funded otherwise. For instance, my own institution funding, and also bigger research projects, which is, well, research projects funded by the Research Council, the Danish Research Council, which is also an external body. And it's a very competitive system we have, I would say.
You have to apply for these funds, I imagine. Would the supervisors apply for the funds? Or
excuse me?
Would the supervisors apply for the funds? Or how does that work in terms of the competitive nature of the funds?
Yeah, we make these applications, and I think it's about 7% or something like that are successful. So people spend time making these applications, and one can discuss whether it's wasted time. People feel that once in a while, but the argument could also be, well, the next application will be better. It wasn't that good That's why but it's about 7% or something like that are successful. Well, in the Research Council, the funding of industrial PhDs, this collaboration, they are more successful. It's I won't say it's easier, but it's acknowledged that it's another project, another effort.
Yeah. And
so they have.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say
they have a higher success rate, I would say.
I was gonna ask you one last question before Chris is gonna have some more questions for you. But I was wondering, out of the 45 on average, how many will follow the industrial PhD course of study?
Well, I don't know. I think we have maybe 15 or something like that now. And I should say that they are at level, or they are evaluated at level with the other PhDs. So we demand the same level. There's no difference. They get the PhD degree. It's the very same PhD degree they get, even though they are in the industry. And we are the one assessing it. It's the academy assessing and guaranteeing the level of the dissertation.
Thank you.
So there's no difference in level. So it counts. The PhD degree counts as another PhD degree, and we should secure that people with these degrees are equipped to apply for positions also at universities. And that's why I say that it's not only for ourselves. We are teaching PhD students that apply for positions wherever or many different places, and we have many. It's a very international program.
Thank you.
We have many people from abroad also.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You could follow me. You can follow me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for the answers.
It's a bit complicated. Yeah, sorry.
Of course.
Hi, Dr. Oxvig. Nice to meet you. My name is Christopher Alton, and I'm a PhD student and instructor in the program. And I'm just wondering, and you've touched on some of this about the industrial PhD already, but as we understand it, a student in your industrial PhD is employed by a company during their research. And you talked about when that partnership is established, as well as how the funding operates. But I'd be interested to know, as an employee of the company, do they have similar labor protections? And does this arrangement shift the role of the academic advisor? How is their role enacted differently as a result of this differentiation of authority, accountability, and thinking specifically around intellectual property authorship?
Yeah. Well, there are challenges, of course, but they are employed by a company, but enrolled at the academy as PhD students. And this is two different things. So the employment, there are regulations on that, which I'm not responsible for. But there are regulations on that, which has to do with employment regulations. So they are employed as other employees at the company. And then we have regulations related to the enrollment, and that's the ones I'm responsible for. And there could be a clash. I have experienced clashes where I have had to argue. I won't tell you about specific cases, but in general, I can say that. Well, the company didn't expect a dissertation like that. They didn't expect these results. And as a matter of fact, they could behave in a way that demanded that I argue with reference to code of conducts of research. Because the company, they might experience that the results are not what they expected. It could be a critical dissertation. for instance, they expected a dissertation. It was about something could be about their way of being a green company, working with circular economy, something like that. And the dissertation might show that, well, that's not the case. Then the company could, if they do not understand what we are talking about here, we are talking about research. It could be a question of disappointment and even of reacting on it, demanding perhaps that I should redraw the dissertation.
That's interesting. That's a really good sort of follow into the next question I had, and if you could maybe expand a little bit further. The motivation and purpose of doctorate work is often at odds with market objectives. I think you're leaning or pointing to that. Can this produce a productive tension and perhaps a broadening of horizons for an industrial PhD student, this tension? Or how has the program and indeed students themselves negotiated such contradictions, either through the research design itself or through disseminating their findings?
Yeah, ideally it could create a productive tension. I will argue for that, but it demands that industry understands that, research is not only innovative or it's also, let's say critical, for instance. But a company understanding that they can also gain from critique is learning from this, and it should, of course, be like that. I mentioned a case before, broadly, and I think the result was successful. While I could, as a matter of fact, argue that no, I'm not going to withdraw this thesis, but it was a hard time. A case like that, also for the PhD student. So I'm not proud of it, I would say, because I've experienced this a few times, and I'm a bit surprised about this. But maybe I don't know how the world is. If hopefully we are leaving these problems, but they are part of a process. I think. I hope. And if not, then, we'll have to write about it, find out. But so what I'm saying is that it is a challenge doing these things. Often it's working pretty well, but it is something that we as researchers has sort of to learn this also. It's a learning process for all of us, being in that dialogue. But at the same time, it's hard arguing against this possibility sort of to influence society with research. And then we experience that it's a challenge. But we want to learn from the challenges and should, of course, stay with research. But, things are happening around the world, apparently. I don't know. In the States, we all follow what is going on there regarding research and research that could be sort of inappropriate according to a government. We are not there, but there are also tensions like that, I would say. I heard in the radio this morning a politician from a certain party here complaining about a museum dealing with gender questions. And the museum is simply called Gender. Formerly, it was a women museum. Now they call it Gender. And this politician argued that they should sort of not fund this museum. So we are all experiencing sort of something. And I'm not on top of it, but neither are you apparently. But you see my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
And it's good discussing it and finding out what is going on, as a matter of fact. But because politicians also here are interfering more, and that's part of it. They fund our institutions, but they are also sort of interfering more than they were earlier on. We have this rule in Denmark called distance between lawmakers and research, but it is as if they interfere, and that is also what could happen with industrial PhDs, I think, because a company has interest in profit. And if they can see that certain results from a PhD student isn't quickly paying off, and they pay part of it, they have sort of to understand, well, why did we do that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Julie has the next question, but I just wanted to say that to me, this is a fascinating discussion and the question that Chris was asking, because I think for any PhD, there is this issue of, being near to the topic, close enough that you can actually be an expert of it, but also having a distance from it so that you can actually have, being that kind of ethical framework that allows you to make the critique. And, there are also potential conflict of interest, like it's not an easy place to be. And I think sometimes in our university, we have an ethics department that looks all of these things. And I can see that, particularly the framework that you're taking on is challenging and also relevant, to say, actually, we should be able to do this. So it's kind of a fascinating approach in itself, And it's a lot, it's a lot for the students, I'm sure.
And it is. And they have a PhD student organization discussing this also, because and they meet and discuss these matters, and they also experience. It is as a matter of fact, this organization is called "Don't Steal My Research." They call it that because they experience sort of that their research is stolen. And that's also by, as a matter of fact, supervisors. And so it has to do with careers, and the PhD student perhaps writes an article, but then there are supervisors and so forth on the article also, and suddenly the PhD student is out. They experience something like that, and so it's very competitive. I don't know if it rings a bell to your situation also.
Well, yeah,
perhaps I don't know, but
just quickly. I mean, I asked the question that I think maybe a few years ago I may have been more cynical, but now that I've worked through a PhD program for several years in our system, I like those, as you mentioned, like the types of influences that sometimes betray a student's research agenda exist also in our in the academy, in the personal relationships that we have as well. So it's more just to ask and to clarify, because the configuration is so different and so close to the market. But very nice answer, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I guess the part of the issue is also when let's say if you are working in a collaborative environment, I guess there can be challenges in terms of who really originated a certain idea, because of the collaborative nature of some of that work. So I can imagine the challenges for the students too.
Hi, my name is Julie Ivanoff, and I'm a PhD student in the second year of our 5-year program. And this conversation actually leads well into my question, which is, during your time as associate professor and head of research, how have your students influenced your research and teaching methods, and how do you position yourself during these moments of tension and challenges in terms of mitigating their research and perhaps industry or academy, and how they view it, and where do you place yourself in that role?
Yeah, I think it has influenced a lot. As a matter of fact, it has been part of my research, sort of, to find out how is it possible to make this dialogue between science and art. So I write about it and I teach about it. So it has influenced a lot. But at the same time, yeah, it has. And well, it's for me as teacher also. I'm not only head of the PhD school. I also teach at bachelor's level. And the change we have, well, introduced PhD research at the institution, but we also had a problem, one could say, that our bachelor students and our master students were they were not equipped for starting as a PhD student because they were not trained at all in what research is before they started at the PhD level at our institution. So it has been sort of a very it has been an effort not only sort of to make the PhD program, but also to introduce what does it mean to think research at bachelor's level, and that is what I also teach. So, well, 3 years ago, it was that we got a new bachelor's study plan. Changing something in the architecture. Now it's in the field of architecture. That's my field when I teach at bachelor's level, it's in the field of architecture because that's where I'm researching myself. And this new bachelor's study plan sort of started teaching students in understanding what it means to work with methods and questions and analysis and so forth. And answering your question, saying, well, I'm very much into that, and think, and it has to do with the PhD effort, but also it's very inspiring and teaching students at bachelor's level, also for my interest in architecture. So it's not something different from my interest in architecture, but it is my interest in architecture. It is influenced by this effort, very much indeed. And I would. We have many discussions, and I have participated in these discussions about what's the difference between scientific research and artistic research and so forth. And I would. I think you have read a paper even from I wrote together with another one. As a matter of fact, the one I wrote a paper together with, he's head of the PhD program at the other architectural school in Denmark, in Aarhus. We have two, and I wrote a paper with him, and I think it was called Ceci n'est pas une pipe. Yeah, and it was in 2000. It was in 2007 or 6. You mentioned it in the questions I received. And I hadn't read that paper, I must admit, for, well, I don't know for how many years, but I read it now and I feared reading it because, well, but I was a bit surprised or satisfied also. As a matter of fact, it deals with these questions in my mind. It discusses what is science. Yeah, it does as far as, and what is perhaps a disappointment is that I wrote another article I made you for recently on research and science creating a new style. And as a matter of fact, it was almost the same 20 years after. So nothing has happened. Or I would say, well, but it was a satisfaction also reading an old paper that made sense in my mind. And did it make sense to you? Some of you read it. Of course, I would like to discuss these matters with you.
I think we have a few questions later on about that paper, but I'll
okay.
Pass it on to Aymen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Professor Oxvig. My name is Aymen. Aymen Aiblu, and I'm a PhD student in the first year of our program. You've touched upon the politicians, lawmakers, and the relationship between them and the researchers. So I would like to ask about your reflections on the role of the architects as a researchers, and do you, for your students, teach them about the complex issues of climate change and the rapid urbanization? Like, should they, after they graduate, play a role on shaping policy, design practices, and the public discourse today?
Yeah. It's not something I would say, yeah, well, we have a policy at the Academy which is related to the United Nations goals, but I won't say that it has been a decision top-down that we should deal with climate changes and so forth, but that is what most PhD students do. What we have as mandatory in the PhD program, and you asked about that, Federica, what is mandatory? Teaching. And you see, we have these many different PhD students and from many different fields, so we do not have a lot of mandatory teaching. We have a study program at the PhD school, renewed every year. You can see it at our homepage. I have myself a course starting Thursday here about new materialism, but that's something I have done together with others. But we have a course program, a big course program, as a matter of fact, with topics that come from researchers at the institution. They have our course program the possibility to deliver teaching at the PhD program. What we have as mandatory is that we twice a year have a seminar where PhD students present their research or their projects for other PhD students and for other supervisors. And that's where we meet a whole day discussing PhD projects. And it's mandatory to present your project once at a seminar like that. And what I experienced at that seminar is, because you can see that, well, last time it was, apparently one could think it might be very, very different projects. Two from conservation and design, and then one architecture. What do they say to each other? And the experience is, on one hand, that they say a lot because they share this, being researchers and dealing with research questions. So there is a synergy, simply. It's a very nice experience. It has been a very nice experience experiencing. It happens simply. But also on top of it, in order to answer your question, what I experience is that they are very occupied with climate changes, problem related to climate change. So they are all, I would say, influenced by what I, in my mind, think of as a paradigm shift. They are in a paradigm shift, questioning differently. But that is also in the field of conservation. Their way of dealing with, well, you can understand that with what happens in the soil, is very much influenced also by Donna Haraway at the School of Conservation.
Thank you.
It doesn't make sense, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, we're switching to the second part of the interview, where we're looking at the drawing process between media and time, and Kitt will ask the first question.
Hi, I am a second year PhD student and my name is Kitt. So my questions are a little long, but they're about the drawing process of the hydro drawings that were described in your 2007 ARCC journal paper, Ceci n'est pas une pipe, the architectural drawing between representation and function. And so, as I understood from your article, the hydro drawings try to take the potentiality of a sketch and translate it into a digital medium. I do agree that there's a level of formality to the digital that isn't present where sketches result from the interaction of the hand to pen to surface. But I personally feel that formality is inherent in the digital, and I was sort of wondering whether you agree with that, despite the openness of the hydro drawings, that there's still a level of formality to them because they are digital. I was also wondering, so if you could tell us more about the process of creating a hydro drawing And how did you envision the hydro drawings contributing to the dialogue around architectural representation, considering how established contemporary methods of architectural representation are? Where did you see these drawings having the most impact? And now that it's been a few years, did that happen?
Well, I'm looking around here. I have many books on my. I'm looking for a book. You don't know. It's called. I haven't. It's called Architecture Anthropology, something like that. It also related to the hydro. I can mail you the title of that book afterwards, because now this text is from 2007, and we have developed that. It was already something pretty special, and it was dealing with, as you say here, from hand to digital, but also being aware that the digital should be questioned and with analog awareness. I read the text saying that also, that it's a continuously a continuous dialogue, but of course it's changed by the digital. It's changed by now. It's another geometry, one could say. But then we introduce analog questions on top of that. You see my point? In a way, the text you read argues that modernism or Renaissance architecture was very, very influenced by geometry. And now we have this influence. It's related also to the digital, but we still also have the challenge, and perhaps we could tackle that challenge perhaps better than the Renaissance and the modernism. That the world isn't geometry. We are architecture isn't geometry, but of course these tools are helpful for architecture, but there is a difference between, in my mind also, I don't remember if you say it that clearly in that text. Architecture isn't geometry. Why not? Because architecture has measures. Geometry has no measure. So there is this scale question, or questions of sort of architecture is in the world and geometry isn't necessarily in the world. And I fully understand if you question the hydro drawings, whether they are in the world. Mm-hmm. That's a very relevant question. Today, that program, developing that, then, is a landscape program. And I often teach at that also, a master's landscape program, where they deal with these diagrams and this way of mapping, one could say, a changed understanding of what we formerly called nature. And it has to do with, I don't know if I should argue more, but what I do for the time being at that program, this landscape program dealing with this, is that I teach, I have a study circle with students there where we read Goffi Deleuze's lectures on painting. I don't know if you know them, but they know. That's my tradition. I once studied in Paris with Goffi Deleuze. Now we are back in the 80s. And it meant a lot to me. And I sort of introduced that at that program there where they dealt with these hydro drawings and so forth also. We had a very good collaboration. It was a teacher or professor who's not there yet. But his students, those students from that program, I'm now working with them, and they have a landscape program. And we are still, I would perhaps say that we are reactualizing Deleuze. Goffi Deleuze. And his, I can recommend his lecture on painting. They have been published recently. They are from 1981, but now they are, and you can find them at the internet at what is called the Deleuze seminars. But there they are only transcriptions from his lectures, because Deleuze didn't write them down, but it was recorded. There was many recorders, Walkman then. So they are all recorded, and now they are edited. And I now read these eight lectures in 8 meetings with a study circle, discussing them and landscape. Drawing in Deleuze's mind, and I could say a lot of this and I should make it short, but he says, well, he's interested in can philosophy learn certain concepts from painting. It's not a question it's a question of learning from painting for Deleuze. And the painting he learns from is painting that isn't limited by representing the world. It's not questions of representation. He starts by saying, well, painters, and then it's Turner or Francis Bacon or Cézanne, they experience a clash or a collapse of these what he called clichés. These clichés that we all have about how we represent the world, but they start sort of experiencing a catastrophe where these clichés fall, and then they start with experiencing paint and light, not as questions of representation, but as question of being. It might sound, I don't know where you are relating to all this, but in my mind it makes sense. And I have this master's study circle, and then I, in 2 days, have a PhD program also about experience new materialism, force. You can read it about it on our, and I also teach PhD students, but related to this. And those PhD students attending that course, I start in 2 days together with some others. There are only, I think 3 of them is only from my own institution. They're coming from universities around Denmark and some also from England, I think. So it's a meeting point again for PhD students in architecture with other, having, the topic is new materialism. And apparently I've run that for 9 years now, not exactly the same, but the question of new materialism. And it has been very popular also as a meeting ground for students from other fields. And it's Deleuze. I'll run this year and then 1 year more. And you're very welcome. But, well, it's not on Zoom. It demands physical presence in Copenhagen. You're welcome in Copenhagen.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually what you spoke about sort of leads to my next question, because in the Book of Abstracts for the 2023 Nordic PhD Research in Architecture Symposium, there was a particular entry that asks how one should deal with the baggage that follows us from our respective disciplines and previous experiences that may affect our ability to gain new knowledge in transdisciplinary arenas. And since our experiences often define the possibilities that we are able to conceive of when observing a drawing or a sketch, or in this case, materials or even architecture, how do you feel that this is a factor that impacts sort of the indefiniteness that you wrote about?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question fully. Please, I don't know if it's... Are you asking? What are you asking? I have to repeat perhaps. Are you asking, well, we have a baggage of preconceived or knowledge that we bring, and what does that mean in the dialogue with others? And how do we sort of bring our baggage, how do we activate it and transgress it? Is it what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, on the one hand, I think, the baggage we bring is it shouldn't sort of. One should probably understand that we are in processes, aren't we? And what is a strength from the field of architecture is that this being continuously questioning what you are doing is sort of what you bring to other fields. I would say that this open way of working. I don't know if I could answer by referring to what I'm very interested in for the time being. It's about what is style. And what I'm thinking is, I don't think that we by now know what style we should create, but I think that we know that we should create a style comparable to what we in history has called style. But being aware that those styles from history we know of, it could be called Renaissance or Baroque or Modernism, they are created by collaborations between art and science, and in awareness of questions that were relevant for those fields, but outside of their baggage, sort of. They were searching, and by searching, they created what we, in retrospect, would call a style. And I think we are in a situation now where we should demand from architects and from scientists dealing with this, that we are in this open situation where none of us has the answer. We do not know the style we are about creating, but I hope we are about creating one dealing with these issues that are related to climate change and so forth. And I say this because I'm in fully disagreement. Now I have a book here, but I'm in fully disagreement with Robert Venturi in his book here, saying that, well, he knows what style we should create, and it should be a style of science or something like that. He says in this book. He's already knowing the answer, sort of, and then the answer is very limited. I'm very fond of Robert Venturi's complexity and contradiction, but I think he became more and more limited in his way of understanding architecture.
Thank you.
So this openness, and that's an openness for the dialogue, for searching, and we are in a situation where we need this searching. And we need transdisciplinarity. Oh, yeah. If I may, I will mail you an article I'm fond of, as a matter of fact. I wrote this summer about composition. Is it okay?
Of course.
And it's related to Bruno Latour, who is a big influence or inspiration for me. And he says, well, it's not enough sort of only to critique. We also have to compose. And I'm interested in understanding how can concepts, the ones Deleuze also is, how can they sort of be part of a compositional way of working? So the dialogue between concepts and drawings is a question of composing, I would say.
Actually, that's a good segue to my question, but I do want to return to that Hydra project. But in this overlap and transdisciplinarity and dialogues in these blurry areas, who is the intended audience or reader for the images that are produced by the Hydra project? And do you believe that those drawings are relevant to that audience today, or are even relevant to only one audience over time?
I probably think that what is now happening at the landscape program in continuation of this is very, very more relevant than the Hydra drawings. Those drawings were experienced as non-understandable also at the architectural school. It was a special program dealing with this, and others didn't understand it, as a matter of fact. So it was a special branch of students also dealing with this. But they were very fond of it, and they work a lot with it, and they have been very successful in Denmark, as a matter of fact. Those students taught there. They are, once you probably also know, Danish architects coming out of that program. But the drawings isn't approachable, I think, for ordinary people. They are not readable unless you. Well, they are transgressive, I think, and meaning that you have sort of transgress certain cliches in order to understand what a diagram is, as a matter of fact. They are diagrammatic, and they are influenced by Stan Allen or whatever. But again, you would say, well, it's not for everybody to understand yet what diagrams do, because we still expect drawings to resemble or represent or something like that. And this is not representations. It's after representation, I would say, and another way of thinking.
That's very interesting. So they're still relevant even though they change over time. It's a matter of who's ready to view them. Yeah,
and I think they are ahead of time then, seeing that they are, I think they are very, very relevant for dealing with landscapes. And we also see that at landscape offices in Denmark, as a matter of fact, influenced by this, that they are interested in composing. They're interested in composing with life forms rather than putting a form on the landscape. So they are composing with life rather. And at that time in 2007, they didn't think like that. We didn't think like that. Not even at that project. We didn't think of this, but something was happening there in the drawings. But now it suddenly makes sense to, that we compose differently with world. And then that way of thinking is something. You can follow me?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you.
But I will mail you. We held a conference on these drawings. When was it? 2017 or something like that. And after that, we had a big publication on because we invited also international scholars to comment on it, and they did. Prominent scholar. They found it interesting. And then I was approached, I was, as a matter of fact, organizer of it, and was approached by Birkhäuser. It is published at a big publisher, by a big publisher, because it was an interesting, it was interesting theoreticians discussing these matters. I will mail you a reference to that book.
Oh, thank you.
It would be very fantastic if you discuss it. I don't know, I'm talking a lot, but that's how it should be probably. But I'm curious to know where you are.
You want to respond?
Oh gosh. To be honest, the question for me is if there is a definite or limited moment for drawings, research, how they transform to our viewing over time and over that audience. So that's what was particularly interesting to me regarding the Hydra drawings. And also how, and just in general, in research in general, if you are an expert as a PhD student, you're becoming an expert on something that is very new, when and who is ready at what point as that research is coming out. It's not so much a clear answer for me, it's just something I'm always pondering.
I would say the one I collaborated with regarding the height drawing, it's not Klaus Peter, but we were more. It was what we call artistic research. And it was, it was a dialogue then between philosophy and drawing, and the drawing part, or the teacher, the professor doing that, he conducted artistic research.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to reference the book of abstracts for the Nordic PhD Research and Architecture Symposium again, because it talks about transdisciplinarity as the collaboration between different sciences and architecture, and urges researchers to develop and use the scientific insight granted by this trans and interdisciplinarity to transform the architecture that we create. And my understanding of science is the sort of generic definition that it's defined by replicable results. And I was wondering, and maybe this is more of a debate on what science is, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on what is meant by scientific insight here.
Yes. It's part of my job sort of to defend science. I say it's a scientific PhD program, and it's not an artistic PhD program. And what is it I am defending then when I say so? I should know, and I think I know. I'm defending a way of working. I'm defending, and that is also what goes for every PhD student we have. When I have an intro meeting telling them what is research at that level, and why do you have to make a PhD plan in accordance with our qualification frame. Our qualification frame is divided into 3 levels. There's one knowledge level, one skill level, and one competency level. And what I say is that, well, at the knowledge level, you should, PhD student here, you start in a field. And in that field, there is a lot of validated knowledge when you start. And it's part of your effort, task, sort of to know Stand der Forschung, the state of research. There is research in your field. That's the knowledge part of it. The skills part of it has to do with, but at the same time, you are aware that this knowledge is created. And you should be aware, how is it created? Which methods is entering this creation? How do you create knowledge? And you should, I tell you, because the student is about doing the same. You should know Stand der Forschung and create and pose a question, and then be aware that you are creating knowledge. And the knowledge isn't, it's very specific probably. It's not an overall everything, but it's knowledge is specific. But this capability sort of to move between already created knowledge and being aware that it is created, and then create knowledge yourself. And conducting a project like that, that is what we call competency, that you are capable sort of conducting, also running the project is part of the learning goal. And that's why making a plan, being aware, tell about your project, that you have time for reading, that you know what to do, that you also disseminate about this, tell about it. You should plan with that. That's all parts of this frame of competency that sort of tells why should you plan with this, because this is part of being a researcher. You can disseminate, you know how knowledge is created, and that's my definition of research. And why is it different from art? Well, it's because these methods, this way of focusing knowledge and so forth, in my mind, scientific knowledge is specific. It's not proposals for a building, and that's something else that we also do. So moving between focusing, knowing that you create knowledge about something specific. I would argue with Donna Haraway, I think, what she writes in Situated Knowledges. Something like this. Can you follow me in this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this way of conducting or making what I teach bachelor students now is also in the small, saying that, well, you should pose a question, you should know how to research or find out methods about finding out, and then you should analyze. Did it make sense? This way of thinking is what I see as thinking as a researcher. They pose a question. There's a building, and they want to know something about that building and how to. And they can draw and they can do many things in order to gain knowledge and read about it. But they are creating knowledge. They are not creating a building, but they do that at the same time in their projects. So we make them move between these. Does it make sense?
Yes. So I guess from a second question, I might just alter it a bit, but if I understood correctly, then the Hydra project would be, as you described, an artistic research project that provides scientific insight. I'm trying to connect.
Yeah, the article you read is part of a scientific project. The very article, the reflection on these drawings, is what I call scientific.
Okay, I understand.
So that's a dialogue. The one professor teaching these drawings, he didn't write that article. He couldn't. I don't know, but he that was not his competency, I would say. But he read it and found it interesting as a dialogue. But it wasn't expected that he should write an article instead of developing his drawings. It influenced his way of dealing with the drawings, but he should keep. He shouldn't necessarily write an article. But I did together, yeah. So I think of that article as a scientific article, reflecting at the same time on these questions.
So likewise, then you would say this continues with the concept of drawings not being static or this singular view, because as you're transitioning between media, they will reveal other information. So that's part of the temporality and the paradox of being, as you were discussing in paradoxes of appearing, you're introducing the philosophy of ephemeral existence. So I think that this continues and builds on that, yes?
Yeah. One student from the field of these Hydra drawings, who's now teaching at the landscape program, I supervised her in her PhD project, and it was about transmediality. On the one hand, she worked with many different medias, but what we assessed was also that she wrote a scientific reflection on it. So you can make collaborations between that, but when it comes to a PhD project, then you have to write, well, not an article, but a dissertation. But of course you can deal with both if you're capable of that. But you have to write a dissertation. Her professor, whom I'm referring to before, didn't write a dissertation on it. She was capable of. And of course, that meant that she spent a lot of time in that, and her exercises in transmediality was limited. But nevertheless, she reflected on it, as we do in this article. And it was equipped with transmedia with many, and I think it became a very good dissertation, as a matter of fact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Oxvig. I guess now we will be transitioning into our last series of questions about the writing process and how do we move from method to criticality in architectural research. And Aymen and Chris will ask those questions.
Yeah, Professor. So in your own academic writings and your role as a program head, how do you emphasize the importance of clear and compelling argumentation in research paper or thesis? And what is your personal strategy for translating complex architectural and urban concepts into effective scholarly writings?
Did I get the question? How do we assess the dissertation?
Like, how do you emphasize the importance of clear
writing
and compelling argumentation in the writings? The argument that you write about.
Well, as a supervisor, when I have been a supervisor myself, that's a crucial part of my job. And it is for everybody. My job as head of PhD program is sort of to, well, stress it, but they already know in their applications that this is what they are to do, writing. And what we do then is, well, as a supervisor, I read what they write and comment on it, and I stress that it's something that should start early on in the process, that they shouldn't postpone writing too late. Writing should be an active part of the work, some have more struggle with that than others. Architects earlier on at my institution hadn't got training in writing earlier on, not very much as bachelor students or master students, but now we start that training at the bachelor's level. So our new students, they write exercises every semester, and then they got feedback on their writing, and some are good at it then, but many are, as a matter of fact. But I think we, as an institution, have very, very good students. It's difficult to enter this institution. It demands high grades. We have something like that. That it's not a pay. It's a free education. You do not pay, but we have limited space. So you have to have very good grades from high school, and many, they also enter other high schools in order to be capable also to transgress the demands that we pose in order to enter the school. So they are very, very good, I think.
But in your own research, in your own writings, not the students.
Yeah. In my own
Yes.
writing, how I in my own writing secure that I argue
The argumentation,
clearly.
exactly, and the translation of complex architectural and urban designs into rights.
I think Aymen is asking if you have particular strategies that you employ in your own work to translate the complexity of the ideas into the writing. So,
Okay.
and how these strategies could be used.
Well, I think I have an imagined reader I write to, probably. The imagined reader is often my girlfriend. She's an artist, as a matter of fact. But she's an architect. It's a bit strange. She's an architect, but she's more into literature, and she's a writer. She's very, very good at writing, but she's not interested in theory at all, one could say. When she can understand what I write, I'm very satisfied. I ask her to read it, and she does. So there is a dialogue there, but I think it's difficult. I won't say that I'm good at it, but I think once in a while something happens that succeeds. but I can never know for the next, so it's always a struggle. But I like the struggle. I learned from the struggle. One could also say you learn a lot from writing. What I have written and succeeded in writing, I would say, is what I remember. Then it stays with you. I don't know if you have that. The last article you have written is really creating something in your mind.
Right. And Professor, in your experience as a supervisor and examining PhD students and theses, what are the most common pitfalls you observe in a PhD research in architecture, and what advice would you give to current PhD students on how to execute an original and impactful dissertation?
I would say, for instance, that you should start writing early on and make that part of the dialogue with your supervisor. I also stress now that running a project, a PhD project, is part of the learning goal. So it is you that sort of take command on the dialogue with the supervisor. Of course, the supervisor should be aware something and help the PhD student. But I think that the PhD student should be the one making the agenda for the next meeting. It should sort of be take command on the process. And thereby learning with the supervisor's advice, of course. But it isn't the supervisor who is in control. It is in the end, of course. The supervisor is responsible. But the supervisor should know that it's the PhD student who should sort of run the project and learn from running it. And that it's also a question of making a good dialogue with the supervisor. Agenda for supervision meetings, for instance, done by the PhD student. What do I want to discuss with my supervisor? So taking control on it, working with the tools early on, writing, sort of have knowing that the process is what you gain from.
Thank you. Chris.
Thanks so much. These are really interesting answers. I hope you don't mind if we just spend one more question on the industrial PhD specifically. And maybe I'll ask it through this process of writing as well. Just in the way that you mentioned how you've learned so much about writing, maybe there's a way in which writing sort of conditions this sort of political orientation. But in what ways have you seen industrial PhD students specifically affirm a political orientation through their research with industry? And does this vary from other modes of thinking or writing, let's say, about politics in the department? Is this reflected in the choice of student methodologies and associations with departmental initiatives? And I'm thinking specifically with your architecture strategy, politics, and research group.
Yeah, if I understand you correctly, there are a lot of factors influencing what is going on here. And for the industrial PhD, we have this obligation of dissemination. The industrial PhDs, they disseminate in the company. They do not teach at our institution. So it's part of the obligation for the company to reflect on how do we want sort of to involve the PhD student in our daily business, because it is a challenge that the PhD student could feel, well, isolated and not integrated. But this demand on that we expect the company to be aware of how they want to receive the PhD student's dissemination of what the PhD student is doing. And that is part of the PhD student's plan, sort of to tell, well, we will try to do it like this. So that we are aware of it happening. And then there are challenges, of course, and then we can better deal with it because it's upfront spoken of. Was it? It wasn't an answer on your question, was it? Oh.
No, it was pointing towards it. I wonder maybe if you could expand a little bit on whether or not you see an emergence of different, let's say, camps of thinking. Whereas especially if you have industrial PhDs who are necessarily disseminating the work through the company versus the rest of your PhD program, and that cohort, maybe it ends up gravitating towards certain political, let's say, orientations in the department, whereas the industrial PhD student may be less inclined to do that kind of work.
Yeah. I would say, I think the experience from industrial PhD student to industrial PhD student is that it's very different from company to company. I know PhD students that feel there are in companies that are very, very interested also in critique. Mm-hmm. But as I said earlier on, I have also experienced, well, the other way around, even at a level where it wasn't acceptable. And it was a question of lawyers and so forth.
Well, we can leave it
there. And that's not, well, it happens. It shouldn't. But of course, it was it's long processes then. And it was with the PhD student and more time, having help also from lawyers outside of our institution, because of course they couldn't tell whether it was the PhD school they had a problem with or it was the company. Suddenly it was a very complicated case, and it was a complicated, exactly one quick case here I'm telling about. It was very complicated because the lawyer, the PhD student approach is from the workers' union, or it's outside of because it could be with us there was a problem. But we found out that, well, it was not like that, and I could also agree. I couldn't know whether the PhD student had behaved. It could be that the company had something. So it was a complicated process. But in the end, in this case, it was the company that conducted wrongly, and we could argue by referring to, well, scientific research. And what it is a question of arguing for, well, you have freedom of methods, you have freedom of and so forth, and they cannot expect certain results. Of course not. Sorry.
No. That's fine. It's maybe it requires a bit of a more embedded place from my perspective to ask that kind of question, revolving around sort of like the cultural aspect of how the school operates in the program. But I can maybe jump into my next question, which is well, it's actually sort of again about the context of the school. So in your paper, Critical Proximities, which you wrote for the 2021 Nordic Design Research Conference, which itself had the theme Matters of Scale, you describe how conventional architectural scaling neutralizes important notions of difference which occur at larger or smaller sizes. Instead, following the tour, you advocate for research practice within a new proximity described as that which is close to and surrounds us. The emphasis on the embedded and contextual has us wondering how Copenhagen itself then operates as a stage for such thinking in the program. Not only in that it has become a paragon, rightly or wrongly, of urban planning's best practices, effectively, but often with specific reference to the work of Danish architect and urban designer Jan Gehl, and associated claims of human scale in which he works. In sum, I suppose the question could be stated as, what is the scale of Copenhagen, and how is it reflected in the research produced as part of the PhD program?
I think it's fair to say that it's a hot potato, and that we struggle with that, because there are in Copenhagen decision made about, for instance, making a new island out here called Lynetteholmen, a huge project. because we have got a new metro and there is a lot of earth, soil, and now they put it into Øresund, making a new island out here. And we are many that sort of protest against this, but it's running. So I would say, just as an example, that architecture, these questions are relevant also for a struggle about the future of the city of Copenhagen. And it's not only about this island; it's about architecture is you know it. It's really important regarding questions or problems related to climate. So, and I can ask you the same question: we are in a paradigm shift, aren't we? And we are also there. And so some of us, and I don't think that our politicians in Denmark are there yet. They are very business as usual. It's a business. And this island out there is a business, and it's a huge business, of course. But it's destroying the environment. It's really a problem for the sea around Copenhagen or outside there, doing it, and they didn't think of it. And it was only decided in 2018, something like that. They didn't think of it then. And now it's running, and we start. No one thought of it actually. So we are in a process of changes, aren't we? And Jan Gehl's oeuvre is, well, it might be part of it, while you can read him in different ways. He's also critiquing architecture that didn't think of spaces between buildings. So it was already, for instance, for him, a critical awareness that produced his observations about the human body and so forth.
Could I ask a follow-up question, which I think might actually be a better way of asking the previous question that I had attempted to ask you about the sort of political orientation of your industrial PhD students. But when you talk about the struggle for the future of Copenhagen, I mean, I understand how, the industrial PhD student inside of the company and their relationship with the university, that might create certain tensions or conflicts. But in terms of this more, let's say, existential work that happens, as you described, the struggle for the future of the city that you work in, what are the ways in which, if there are any differences, that the industrial student and the other PhD students sort of affirm themselves inside of that struggle? Or do you find that the industrial students end up being, for whatever reason, less inclined towards that political orientation, or does it just emerge differently? Or not, or do you not notice much difference between the two?
No, yeah, I do, but it depends also on the company. And the case I have spoken about, it was a big company wanting to be green, and they wanted a result telling that they were green. Why? They had this goal of being green. Why? Yeah, because there's money in being green. But and it was a problem. But we also have companies, for instance, a landscape office, that is very much aware of what we are talking about here and successful. And PhD students there, they have, they could participate in our discussion here because the company does. And it's a successful company. So something is also happening that, as a matter of fact, architects, landscape architects, dealing with these issues, as a matter of fact, also might be successful, winning competitions. And the one I'm referring to here now won a big competition, also out there, not at that island, but another part of the harbor in Copenhagen. Big landscape project. And it is a different way of thinking.
No, thank you.
Influenced by research, influenced by, at that company, they are It's called SLA. I don't know if you know him. SLA. You can visit their homepage, SLA, and they have at their office biologists, geologists, anthropologists, and architects working together. So in a way, I would say they are almost more advanced than we are at the school, and they succeed from it.
Would you ever partner with an NGO, or must it sort of be a for-profit company, let's say?
Yeah, no. Well, it could be a possibility. I myself, I haven't, but that could be a possibility, and it could also be a possibility in this society, sort of, to fund it.
Thank you.
So we are still.
Thanks a lot for the insights, Professor. One last question to conclude. I'd like to ask you if you had to recommend one essential book or article that every architecture PhD student should read to understand the current research in landscape in your field, what would it be and why?
In the field of a landscape?
Yes. And in general, if, like for a PhD student to do about architecture, yes.
In my field?
Exactly. Yeah.
What I read with these landscape students, it's not only but it's also I read a lot of Bruno Latour, and Latour has, as you probably know, but has influenced architects. Do you know the Terraformer project? Federica Etucci. Well, I'm looking around here. Well, I think I have it. Here, this is a PhD dissertation, as a matter of fact. This one, but it's not from my school. But it's. Can you see it? Gaia Graphi. It's a PhD dissertation from. Albina Janeva has supervised this. It's by an architect from that field, Bruno Latour's field. She has, Alexandra Arenne has, collaborated with him, even written articles together with him, but she's an architect and has made this PhD dissertation. So that interests me a lot. Things are happening.
I'd love to answer as a dissertation.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was luckily, wasn't it? It was beneath my computer here because I've raised it, but then I suddenly, oh yeah, it's there.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Professor Oxvig. It was wonderful to learn more, about the PhD program and also your research. And I hope you enjoyed the questions that were prepared by all of us.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure for me, and I would like to know more about you, but now it has been me mostly. But thank you for inviting me.